Are you ready for today's HOA insanity? Also, I have a podcast with more stories. Search for the Austin Stories podcast or check out the description of this video for a link. Here we go. HOA President vandalized my truck and had it towed away to have a junkyard to dismantle it. They were forced to fully repair it, and I sued the HOA President. Posted by Knock on Wood HOA. This incident happened in January of this year. Last year, I moved into a neighborhood with an optional HOA. At the time, I'd come into enough money to buy a house outright. The only reason I moved here is because the HOA was optional and it's a nice, safe neighborhood. It's a slice of heaven compared to where I used to live. I own two vehicles, a 2004 Toyota Camry and a 1999 Ford F-150. The Camry is my daily driver, while the F-150 is my hauler for when I need it. I bought the truck around the same time that I bought the house to help me out with the move. And I used it to pull a rented trailer when I was moving my stuff in. The F-150 is old, but it's in good mechanical order, and I try to keep both of my vehicles clean with monthly trips through a car wash. The local HOA did not like me from the start due to my refusal to join. The HOA president was a retired old man who seemed like he had nothing better to do. So he tried multiple times to sell me on joining and sent me several applications in the mail. But I always declined. Politely at first. But when the president got more aggressive, I told him to shove it where the sun doesn't shine. That's when the HOA decided that I was a member anyway, and then they started sending me fines in the mail with that claim. I knew they were bogus, so I went to the next HOA meeting to dispute the fines. They tried to tell me that by living here, I'm in the HOA whether I liked it or not. This was an obvious power move and something that I was ready for. I could only laugh in amazement of their stupidity, and I said as much to them. Then I told the board that not only was I not a member, but I'd gotten a lawyer to write up a C&D for them. I handed the envelope over. The board skimmed it and then furiously told me to get out. The fine stopped for a few months and then started right back up again at random. So I popped into another HOA meeting and I told them that this was not legal. I'm not in their HOA and I'd take them to court if they didn't stop. Once again, I was furiously told to get out. The fines stopped for good, but the HOA president decided that I needed to be made an example of. It happened only a few days later. I came home to find my F-150 gone from my driveway. I checked the cameras and saw the HOA president himself walk onto my property. He took out a pocket knife and stabbed each of my truck's tires in the sidewalls, then unscrewed the license plates off, put them in a bag, and just casually walked away with them. Then, a little while later, a tow truck came and hauled my truck away. I called the police, and together we went to see the HOA president. But he wasn't home. With my situation explained, this was not considered a civil matter, but grand theft auto. The police traced the tow truck as being from a local junkyard and not from an impound lot. I accompanied the police there, and not only was the HOA president present at the junkyard, but my F-150 was there being taken apart by about 4 men. They'd already removed the headlights, the hood, the bumper, and the radiator, and all of the panels off of the front of the truck by the time we got in there. There was stuff disconnected all over the engine bay, and the catalytic converters had already been cut out. The HOA president looked like a deer in headlights when he saw me there with police. I was nearly angry beyond words when I saw my truck in that condition. Nearly, I say, because I went off like a foul-mouthed country sailor on the people who'd ripped my truck apart. The HOA president was caught red-handed, but he insisted that he'd only towed my truck because it was in a sorry state and looked abandoned. I said he illegally took it off of my private property since the HOA had no right to tow it off of my land, and he clearly had not been aware of my cameras as they'd seen everything that he did. He went pale at first and then furiously tried to stomp towards me, looking like he was ready for a fight while yelling that my truck had been an eyesore, so he got rid of it. This action earned him some new bracelets and a free ride to the station. The police were somewhat merciful to the junkyard staff, who claimed to have only been doing their jobs. The owner of the junkyard is a cousin to the HOA president, so he was contracted to do any towing for the HOA since he was also owned a local impound. He had no idea I wasn't a member of the HOA and also was not aware that his cousin had ordered his employees to tear my truck apart for parts as an abandoned vehicle. The police cited all sorts of broken laws to the employees and the owner, and then they agreed to put my truck back together. But I said that it had better be at least as good as it was, if not better, or I'd be going to my lawyer. The owner told his employees to do whatever it takes, or he'd separate them from their jobs. Then he told me he'd bill the HOA president for everything later. Then the police and I got to watch as all of those employees had to painstakingly put my truck back together, piece by piece. And they repeatedly muttered things about me to each other and flashed me the stink eye from time to time. Yeah, I'm guessing the HOA president offered to bribe them all to take my truck apart as quickly as possible. But now they had to fix it for free. And they were at it for hours. They had to weld the catalytic converters back in and even had to replace some parts entirely due to damage caused during hasty disassembly. When they first fired up the engine, it had an obvious misfire. Yeah, they denied it, but police sided with me that they could tell that it had a misfire too. Turns out they had ruined one of the coil packs taking the truck apart, and they had to order new parts from a nearby auto parts store to fix it. One of the headlights also stopped working. Again, something that they had to fix because I stated that I could prove with my home cameras that they were both working when I last drove it. And the bulbs were nearly brand new LEDs, so they had to have broken something. The coolant lines had also been just cut instead of simply disconnected, probably because they were trying to take the truck apart in a hurry. So those were more parts that had to be ordered from the nearby store as well. I can only imagine the total cost that was billed to the HOA president for this. All 4 of the tires had to be replaced because they were not repairable. So they had to leave the truck on a lift and take all 4 wheels off. There were other problems too, and all of these junkyard mechanics had to work overtime to put the truck back together on the hopes that I wouldn't sue or press charges. I wasn't even able to take the truck home till the next day evening because the police had to get my plates back and the junkyard staff had to take the wheels in for new tires. By the time I got the truck back, the 2 junkyard employees I saw there gave me looks that just said not to come back. And the truck actually runs better than before. So essentially, I got a free sort of overhaul for my trouble. As for the HOA president, well, I did sue him for trespassing, for theft, destruction of property, and the illegal tow. He ended up paying his cousin for all of my truck repairs, lost his position in the HOA, and moved out of the neighborhood shortly after losing the lawsuit because he had no leg to stand on in court since everything was caught on CCTV. He pretty much surrendered to the asked-for settlement, which is why it didn't get drawn out. The HOA has not bothered me at all since that truck incident, and my neighbors love me for getting rid of the old HOA president, as he was a power-tripping narcissist to them all and kept issuing pointless fines that had to be regularly disputed. Also, I've been back to that junkyard for parts, but for my Camry instead, as I went to pull a replacement grill for it and found one in excellent shape there. They did recognize me, and they gave me some dirty looks, but otherwise, they didn't bother me. Updates and more info from OP. One commenter says, if it was optional, was it a neighborhood association? Most HOA are mandatory as they run with the land, unless they were trying to annex you. Either way, kudos on blowing their HOA. And OP replies, from what I know, the HOA was originally set up as a volunteer association, probably to make it look more appealing. So that system remained for whatever reason. but they slowly got almost everyone else in the neighborhood to join. I'm told the HOA was actually pretty good until the current board took over. However, them booting out the president that I sued effectively neutered them. And I'm betting the board will all get replaced since the current president that was elected after the last one was kicked out is way nicer. The rest of the board are old fat cats, and several of my neighbors have told me that they want to replace them in the next board election, which is happening soon. Commenter replies, "Why replace when you can dissolve the HOA? Just do it. Plant the idea." OP responds, "Believe me, I've heard that idea may be floating around, but since I'm not in the HOA, I'm not kept in the know about most details. But whatever happens, I'll try to update about it as the board elections are only weeks away." Next commenter says, "The fact that the junkyard owner made the HOA pay for all the repairs is probably the only reason those employees still have jobs. If they ever give you a hard time, maybe bring that up." And OP replies, "Yeah, but I'm betting that junkyard owner isn't really a very good person. Someone told me they heard he used to run a chop shop in the 90s and may still be doing that. I can't confirm or deny that though, which is why I didn't bother to include it. But yeah, it was just grand that the HOA president had to foot the bill to basically rebuild half of my truck." See, this is a beautiful story here, full of malicious compliance and pro-revenge to the HOA pres, because he thought that he would do this method here to get rid of OP and just completely illegally destroy his truck and literally have it taken apart. But when OP came through, not even part of the HOA, he says, "No, I'm going to bust you, you president. This is all going to fall back on you. Everybody hates you now. You're now off the board. You leave the whole entire neighborhood. You're sued." It's literally insane, the fallout of this nuclear level revenge of what OP was able to do to this HOA president and still get a better version of his truck back in the end. Way to go, OP. What would have you done? Old boss steals owed money through mandatory retirement payments and tells me if I don't like it to take it up with the authorities. So I did. Posted by My Nuts Are Musical. Here we go. A few years back now, I worked for a smallish locally owned company owned by two friends. The company was going strong when I started, but after 10 years there, the place was going downhill fast. One day, we discovered the bosses had not been making superannuation payments to us, which my country's required retirement fund that employees and employers are required to pay into, for over 2 years, owing tens of thousands over all the employees. This was the final straw for me, and I gave them 2 weeks' notice. As I was basically the last manager there, most of the employees also quit with me, and this really ticked off the owners who thought that I was somehow overreacting. I made them ensure that they would pay me what I was owed, or I would get the tax agency involved. A few weeks later, I get an email detailing repayments significantly less than what was owed. When I emailed back, they told me that they had taken hours I owed in time in lieu out of what was owed in superannuation, and if I had a problem with that, they would have no issue speaking with the authorities about the hours that I stole from them. This is, of course, highly illegal. For one, we had no contract laying out that I would have to repay owed hours. Secondly, they most definitely cannot take that money from my superannuation repayments. I decided not to reply, save the email, and move straight onto the tax agency, which they look after superannuation affairs. This took a very long time, as the process is very slow, but after about a year and several different tax representatives, I one day got a call out of the blue from one of the owners. This was a very angry, threatening call asking why I had reported them to the tax agency and why I was determined to ruin their lives. I told him exactly why I did it and that he reaped what he sowed. A few days later, I get an email from the tax agency telling me that they will be repaying all that was owed, plus interest accrued over the now 3+ years that they didn't pay. They would have also been put on a blacklist of employers had they not sold the business a few months after we left. For more background, after I quit, I took 2 weeks off to be alone with my thoughts and relax for a bit before accepting one of the many job offers that I received once my departure had been made public in our industry. I walked away with a higher pay, more secure job, and the position every company in the industry was fighting for at the time, as the company I chose won the contract and they gave the position to me. This is beautiful because the company thinks that they can get over screwing over people for their retirement, which is very important, mind you, and something that should be taken very seriously. This is literal theft of their money, and they think that they can just say, oh, go ahead, talk to the authorities about it. We'll defend ourselves. We don't care. Yeah, what they're doing is illegal. That's so stupid to say that you don't care to talk to the authorities when you're literally committing felony level fraud. Come on, man. Like, what are you going to do when they come to you and they say, oh, you were guilty of this? Yeah, exactly. There's nothing you can do. You're just way out of your mind, employer. Way out of your mind. Way to go, OP, for standing your ground and doing what's right. What do you think? HOA breaks the law. I take them to court and lawyer up. You do not want to miss the insane fallout of this awesome story. Click it on your screen to check it out, and I will see you there.